Part 1. The massive war room fell silent as Admiral Vexithara's crystalline hand slammed against the holographic display. Red warning lights flashed across dozens of star systems as the Zephyrian Empire's invasion fleet swept through Coalition space like a plague. The Admiral's scarred exoskeleton reflected the crimson alerts as she studied the battlefield. Reports with growing concern. 3 systems have already fallen, she announced to the assembled representatives of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Her voice carried the weight of countless battles fought across the galaxy. The Zephyrians are moving faster than our intelligence predicted. Their new plasma cannons can punch through our shields in seconds. Around the circular chamber, delegates from 30 different worlds shifted nervously. The Corvalian ambassador's tentacles writhed with anxiety, while the insectoid Thrakari clicked their mandibles in distress. Everyone knew what this meant. The Zephyrian Empire had been building its forces for decades, and now they were striking with overwhelming power. General Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human section, her weathered face calm despite the chaos surrounding her. At 55, she had seen more combat than most species experienced in their entire evolutionary history. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple military style, and her dark eyes watched the proceedings with careful attention. "We need every available fleet," Admiral Vexithara continued. "The Altarian Fifth Fleet will defend the core systems. The Corvalian deep space units will protect the outer colonies. The Thrakari swarm fighters will provide mobile support." The Admiral paused as her eyes fell on the small human delegation. Earth had only recently joined the Coalition, and their technology seemed laughably primitive compared to the advanced civilizations that dominated the galaxy. While other species had developed energy weapons and quantum shields, humans still used metal bullets and chemical explosives. General Chen stood up slowly. "Admiral, the human fleet is ready for deployment. We have 47 ships prepared for combat operations." The chamber erupted in barely controlled laughter. The Corvalian delegate's tentacles trembled with amusement. 47 ships? He wheezed. "With those primitive kinetic weapons of yours? The Zephyrians will vaporize you before you can even get within firing range." The Thrakari ambassador clicked loudly. "Your species still uses metal projectiles and chemical propulsion. This is not a museum exhibition, human. This is modern warfare." Even some of the more diplomatic delegates smiled behind their hands. Everyone knew about human technology. They had seen the reports. Crude missiles, simple bullets, and basic nuclear weapons. It was like bringing a stone knife to a plasma cannon fight. Admiral Vexithara raised her hand for silence, though she too seemed skeptical. "General Chen, while we appreciate Earth's willingness to contribute, perhaps your forces would be better suited for rearguard duties. The Kepler 442b system has some mining colonies that need protection. It's relatively safe, away from the main battle zones. The assignment was clearly meant to keep the humans out of the way. Kepler 442b was a backwater system with nothing but asteroid mining operations and a small civilian population. It was the kind of posting given to forces that couldn't be trusted with real combat." General Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "We understand, Admiral. The human fleet will take position at Kepler 442b and await further orders." "Excellent," Admiral Vexithara said with obvious relief. "The real fighting will require advanced energy weapons and quantum shielding. Your traditional approach might not be effective against Zephyrian technology." As the meeting broke up, delegates clustered together, discussing deployment strategies and tactical approaches. Most ignored the human delegation entirely. A few offered polite nods, but their expressions clearly showed what they thought of humanity's chances in a real war. The Corvalian ambassador approached Admiral Vexithara as the chamber began to empty. "You were wise to send them to a quiet sector," he said quietly. "Can you imagine if we had actually put them in a combat zone? Those primitive weapons would be less than useless." The Admiral nodded, though something in General Chen's calm acceptance bothered her. Most species would have argued or protested such an obvious dismissal. The human had simply accepted the assignment and walked away. There was something unsettling about that quiet confidence. Outside the war room, General Chen walked with her aide, Commander Maria Rodriguez. The younger woman's face showed clear anger at the treatment they had received. "General, they're treating us like children with toy guns," Rodriguez said through gritted teeth. "We should have told them about our real capabilities." "No," Chen replied calmly. "Let them think what they want to think. Underestimation can be a weapon if you know how to use it. They boarded the transport shuttle that would take them back to the human fleet. Through the viewport, Chen could see the Coalition's mighty warships preparing for battle, sleek vessels bristling with energy weapons and surrounded by shimmering quantum shields. They were beautiful and deadly, the peak of galactic military technology. But beauty and technology weren't everything in war. Chen had learned that lesson many times on Earth, where humans had fought each other for thousands of years before ever reaching the stars. Every continent had seen countless conflicts. Every generation had produced warriors who understood that victory came not from having the best weapons, but from knowing how to use whatever weapons you had. The other species in the galaxy had developed their technology in relative peace. Most had unified their homeworlds without major wars. They had reached the stars through cooperation and scientific advancement. Their military technology was impressive, but their understanding of actual warfare was limited to textbooks and simulations. Humans were different. Earth had been a crucible of conflict that had forged a species uniquely adapted to warfare. Not because they were naturally violent, but because they had learned to be creative, adaptive, and ruthless when survival was at stake. As the shuttle approached the human fleet, Chen smiled slightly. The Coalition delegates had seen primitive ships with crude weapons. They hadn't seen the countless hours of tactical planning, the innovations born from necessity, or the warrior culture that had evolved over millennia of conflict. "Commander," she said to Rodriguez, "send a message to all ship captains. Tell them we have our assignment, and remind them that every great victory in human history began with someone underestimating us." The shuttle docked with the flagship Indomitable, a vessel that looked crude compared to the sleek alien warships. Its hull was scarred metal instead of energy-absorbing composites. Its weapons were simple kinetic launchers instead of elegant plasma cannons. But inside that ungainly shell was something the galaxy hadn't seen before, a warship designed and crewed by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. "General," Chen walked onto the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, the Zephyrian Empire was advancing with overwhelming technological superiority. They would expect the same kind of conventional battle they had always fought. Fleets meeting in open space, energy weapons against shields, victory to the side with better technology. They were about to learn that war was much more than technology. It was about thinking differently, adapting quickly and using every advantage you could find. And humanity had advantages that no one in the galaxy suspected. The battlefield would teach them all a lesson they would never forget. Part 2, the briefing room aboard the Indomitable hummed with quiet efficiency as General Chen stood before a holographic display showing the Kepler 442b system. 47 human ship captains filled the cramped space, their faces bearing the weathered look of career military officers. Unlike the elegant meeting chambers of other species, this room was purely functional. Metal walls, harsh lighting, and no decoration except for battle flags from Earth's various nations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, her voice cutting through the low conversation, "we've been assigned to defend a mining system that the rest of the galaxy considers unimportant. They think we're being kept out of the real war because our weapons are too primitive." A few officers chuckled grimly. Captain James Morrison of the destroyer Wellington raised his hand. "General, their plasma weapons can melt through our armor in seconds. Their shields can absorb our kinetic rounds like raindrops. How exactly are we supposed to fight them?" Chen smiled, and something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Captain, tell me, when has humanity ever fought a fair fight?" The question hung in the air as the officers considered it. Throughout human history, victory had rarely gone to the side with better equipment. David had beaten Goliath with a simple sling. Vietnamese fighters had defeated advanced armies using tunnels and guerrilla tactics. Afghan mountains had swallowed mighty empires whole. The galaxy thinks in terms of fleets meeting in open space. Chen continued. They line up their ships, fire their energy weapons, and whoever has better technology wins. That's not war. That's a science fair competition. Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, activating a different display. "We've been studying Zephyrian tactics for months. They're incredibly advanced, but they fight like machines. Everything by the book. No creativity, no adaptation." The hologram showed recordings of recent Zephyrian victories. Their ships moved in perfect formations. Their plasma cannons fired in synchronized volleys, and their shields operated at optimal frequencies. It was beautiful, efficient, and completely predictable. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't play by their rules, Chen said. But we've had thousands of years to learn that rules are just suggestions when your survival is at stake. Chief Engineer Petrov, a grizzled veteran with Slavic features, grinned widely. General, I've been working on some modifications that might interest you. Remember those old nuclear submarines from Earth's archives? The ones they said were obsolete museum pieces? Chen nodded. The ones we brought along for historical research? Historical research, Petrov repeated with a wink. I've modified them for space operations. No energy signatures, completely invisible to sensors designed to detect plasma drives. They can drift through space like ghosts. Captain Lisa Park of the cruiser Soul leaned forward. What good are submarines in space? The same thing they were good for in Earth's oceans, Chen replied. Stealth attacks. Hit and run, making the enemy afraid of shadows. She gestured to the display, which now showed the asteroid mining operations around Kepler 442b. This isn't just a star system. It's a weapons platform waiting to be activated. The officers studied the tactical display with growing interest. The asteroid belt was vast and complex, with mining tunnels that could hide entire fleets. The civilian mining equipment could be converted into kinetic launchers. The industrial facilities could manufacture weapons using simple materials that alien sensors wouldn't recognize as threats. Commander Rodriguez will coordinate our intelligence operations, Chen announced. We need to know everything about Zephyrian technology before they arrive. Captain Morrison, your destroyers will serve as bait. Let them think they're winning while we gather data. Morrison straightened. General, are you asking us to sacrifice ships? I'm asking you to sacrifice empty shells filled with scrap metal and broadcasting equipment, Chen corrected. We'll make them think they're destroying real warships while our actual forces remain hidden. The plan began to take shape as each captain received their assignments. The human fleet would split into 3 groups. Visible forces that would appear weak and frightened, hidden assets that would study enemy capabilities, and ghost ships that would strike without warning. What about weapons? Asked Captain Zhang of the frigate Hong Kong. Our kinetic rounds can't penetrate their shields. Chief Engineer Petrov's grin widened. That's because you're thinking like them. They expect kinetic weapons to be bullets and missiles. They've designed their shields accordingly. He activated another display showing simple metal rods. These are tungsten penetrators. No explosive warheads, no guidance systems, no energy signatures. Just very hard metal moving very fast. How fast? Zhang asked. Fast enough to ignore their shields, Petrov replied. Their energy barriers are designed to stop plasma and deflect conventional projectiles. They're not designed to stop relativistic kill vehicles. Simple metal rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The physics were elegant in their simplicity. Zephyrian shields could absorb enormous amounts of energy from plasma weapons, but they had never encountered kinetic weapons with enough velocity to simply punch through the energy field like it wasn't there. There's more, Petrov continued. Those old nuclear warheads we brought, the ones from Earth's primitive arsenals, they're completely invisible to Zephyrian sensors. Their technology is so advanced that it can't detect something as simple as enriched uranium and chemical explosives. Captain Sarah Kim of the heavy cruiser Gettysburg shook her head in amazement. So our most obsolete weapons are actually our most effective ones? Against an enemy who has never seen them before, yes, Chen confirmed. They've spent centuries perfecting defenses against energy weapons and exotic matter. They have no idea how to stop a chunk of metal or a fission bomb. The briefing continued for hours as the details were worked out. Human ships would use unpowered trajectories to avoid detection. Communication would be through tight beam lasers and even simple radio, technology so primitive that advanced civilizations had stopped monitoring those frequencies long ago. Most importantly, they would use Earth's greatest military asset, the ability to think like the enemy while acting completely differently. Every human officer had studied the great military commanders of history. Sun Tzu, Alexander, Napoleon, Rommel, Patton. They understood that victory came not from fighting harder, but from fighting smarter. As the meeting broke up, General Chen remained behind with her senior staff. The weight of command showed on her face as she studied the tactical displays. Are we really going to pull this off, General? Commander Rodriguez asked quietly. Chen was silent for a long moment, thinking of all the times in human history when outnumbered forces had achieved impossible victories. Maria, The galaxy is about to learn something that we've known for thousands of years. Technology can be copied, weapons can be improved, but experience earned through conflict cannot be replicated in a laboratory. She turned to face her officers. The Zephyrians have never fought an enemy that refused to play by the rules. They've never faced an opponent who turned their strengths into weaknesses. They're about to get a very expensive education in why Earth produced so many military philosophers. Outside the ship, the human fleet began to disperse according to the plan. To any observer, it would look like a small, frightened force taking defensive positions around an unimportant star system. But appearances could be deceiving. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive approach was also the most effective one. Part 3 Fleet Commander Zarthul stood on the bridge of the Zephyrian battleship, Cosmic Dominance, watching the Kepler 442b system grow larger on the main display. His elongated skull bore the ritual scars of a career military officer, and his forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he reviewed the tactical data. "Sir, we're detecting 47 human vessels in defensive positions around the asteroid mining complex," reported his sensor operator, a younger Zephyrian with unblemished skin. "They appear to be using primitive chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons." Zarthul's lipless mouth curved in what passed for a smile among his species. 300 Zephyrian warships surrounded him, each one armed with the most advanced plasma cannons in the galaxy. Against such overwhelming firepower, the human resistance would last perhaps 10 minutes. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "Standard attack formation. We'll demonstrate the futility of their primitive weapons, then proceed to more strategically valuable targets." The Zephyrian fleet moved with mechanical precision, their ships forming perfect attack wedges as they approached the human positions. Energy signatures blazed across their sensors as plasma cannons charged to full power. This would be a brief and decisive victory. But as the Zephyrian ships closed to weapons range, something unexpected happened. The human fleet simply vanished. "Report," Zarthul snapped, his four hands dancing across his command console. "Sir, they were there a moment ago," the sensor operator said, confusion evident in his voice. 47 ships in clear formation. Now, nothing. The main display showed empty space where the human fleet had been positioned just seconds before. No energy signatures, no drive emissions, no trace that they had ever existed at all. "Impossible," muttered the tactical officer. "Ships that large cannot simply disappear." Zarthul studied the sensor readings with growing unease. In 3 decades of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Ships could be destroyed, leaving debris. They could retreat, leaving drive signatures. But they couldn't just cease to exist. "Begin systematic search patterns," he ordered. Full sensor sweep of the entire system. They must be hiding somewhere. The Zephyrian fleet spread out, their advanced sensors probing every asteroid and scanning every possible hiding spot. The search continued for 20 minutes without result. Then the first ship disappeared. The frigate Stellar Spear had been investigating a cluster of mining equipment when it simply stopped responding. One moment it was transmitting routine status reports, the next it was gone. Not destroyed in battle, not retreating under fire, just gone. "Fleet Commander," the communications officer reported with barely controlled panic. "We've lost contact with Stellar Spear." Before Zarthul could respond, another ship vanished. Then another. The mighty Zephyrian fleet was being picked apart by an enemy they couldn't even see. What Fleet Commander Zarthul didn't know was that the human ships had never left the system. They had simply turned off their engines and allowed momentum to carry them into the asteroid field, where they drifted like dead rocks among the mining debris. Chief Engineer Petrov's modifications had worked perfectly. The converted submarines ran completely silent, using chemical thrusters that produced no energy signature detectable by sensors designed to track plasma drives. They moved through space like predators, invisible and patient. Aboard the submarine USS Thresher, Captain Rebecca Foster watched her prey through passive optical sensors. The Zephyrian cruiser Voidwalker hung motionless just 3 kilometers away, its crew scanning the asteroids for signs of human ships. They had no idea that death was drifting silently toward them. "Firing solution locked," reported her weapons officer quietly. "Fire," Foster commanded. The tungsten rod that emerged from the Thresher's launcher was nothing more than a metal spike, 3 meters long and perfectly smooth. No guidance system, no warhead, no energy signature. just extremely hard metal accelerated to 12% of light speed. The Zephyrian shields, designed to absorb and deflect energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper. The tungsten rod punched through the energy barrier without slowing down, then through the ship's hull, then through 3 more decks before exploding out the far side in a spray of superheated metal. The explosion that followed came from the ship's own power core, ruptured by the impact. Void Walker died in a brilliant flash that lit up the asteroid field for several seconds. Similar scenes played out across the Kepler system as human submarines struck from the darkness. The Zephyrians had never encountered weapons that could simply ignore their defensive systems. Their sensors couldn't track projectiles with no energy emissions. Their shields couldn't stop solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. But the humans had saved their most devastating surprise for last. "Sir, we're being boarded," reported a panicked voice from the battleship Cosmic Fury. Zarthul stared at his communications console in disbelief. Boarded by whom? Our sensors show no enemy ships in range. The truth was even more disturbing than he imagined. The objects striking Zephyrian ships weren't just tungsten rods. Some of them were modified cargo containers packed with human marines and combat armor. Each impact delivered not just kinetic damage, but a squad of highly trained soldiers directly into the enemy ship. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez kicked through the breach her transport container had torn in the Zephyrian hull, her assault rifle ready. Behind her, 11 other Marines followed, their faces hidden behind tactical visors that gave them a nightmarish appearance in the flickering emergency lighting. The Zephyrian crew had never experienced boarding action. Their training focused on ship-to-ship combat using energy weapons at long range. They had no idea how to fight in the cramped corridors of their own vessel against enemies who moved like deadly shadows. Vasquez and her team advanced through the ship with brutal efficiency. The Marines had trained for years in mock-ups of alien vessels, studying Zephyrian psychology and tactics. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The aliens were tall and thin, adapted for low-gravity environments. Their forearms made them excellent at operating complex control systems, but clumsy in hand-to-hand combat. Their large eyes were sensitive to light, making them vulnerable to flash grenades. Their elongated skulls housed brains that were highly intelligent, but not adapted for the split-second decisions required in close combat. Within 15 minutes, the Marines had captured the bridge and engineering sections. The mighty battleship Cosmic Fury had been conquered from within by 12 humans with simple chemical weapons and basic tactics. Similar boarding actions were taking place throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Each successful assault sent more ships drifting powerless through space, their crews either dead or captured by human forces that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Fleet Commander Zarthul watched his fleet disintegrate with growing horror. In less than an hour, he had lost over 50 ships to an enemy he still couldn't detect. His advanced sensors showed nothing but empty space, yet his forces were being systematically destroyed by invisible attackers. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," he commanded. "Fall back to safe distance and regroup." But even retreat proved dangerous. As Zephyrian ships turned to flee, more tungsten rods streaked from the darkness. The humans had positioned themselves along likely escape routes, turning the entire star system into a killing field. By the time the surviving Zephyrian forces reached minimum safe distance, Zarthul's fleet had been reduced to fewer than 200 ships. 1/3 of his force had been eliminated without landing a single blow on the enemy. "How?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed the Kepler system swarming with invisible threats. "How did primitives with metal weapons destroy our most advanced warships?" His sensor officer, a veteran of many campaigns, spoke quietly. "Sir, I don't think they're primitives. I think we made a terrible mistake." For the first time in his career, Fleet Commander Zarthul faced an enemy that refused to fight by the established rules of galactic warfare. The humans had turned every assumption about space combat on its head, using tactics that no civilized species would consider. They weren't fighting like a modern military force. They were fighting like pirates, guerrillas, and barbarians. And they were winning. The survivors of his fleet hung in space, afraid to advance and unable to retreat safely. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, human forces waited with weapons that shouldn't work but somehow did. The battlefield had begun to speak, and its message was terrifying. Part 4 Admiral Vexithara stood before the Galactic Defense Coalition's Emergency Command Center, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the red warning lights that flashed across dozens of tactical displays. The reports coming from the Kepler system made no sense at all. Fleet Commander Zarthul requests immediate reinforcements, reported the Corvallian communications officer, his tentacles trembling with confusion. He claims his advanced fleet has suffered 60% casualties from human forces using impossible weapons. The Thrakari ambassador clicked her mandibles in disbelief. Impossible weapons? They use metal bullets and chemical explosives. How could they damage ships equipped with quantum shielding? Admiral Vexithara studied the fragmentary battle reports with growing concern. Ships vanishing without trace. Boarding actions by forces that shouldn't exist. Kinetic weapons penetrating the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. Either Fleet Commander Zarthul had suffered a complete mental breakdown, or something was happening at Kepler that challenged everything they knew about warfare. Send the second battle group to reinforce the Kepler system, she ordered reluctantly, and request detailed sensor recordings of any combat encounters. I want to understand what we're dealing with. Meanwhile, 300 light-years away, General Chen watched from the command center buried deep within asteroid mining station Delta 7 as Zephyrian reinforcements poured into the system. 200 fresh enemy ships joined the survivors of the first assault, forming a massive fleet that could reduce the entire asteroid belt to glowing debris. General, they're coming in fast, reported Commander Rodriguez from her position at the sensor station. 500 ships total, and they're not taking any chances this time. Full combat spread with overlapping fields of fire. Chen nodded calmly. The humans had bloodied the enemy's nose, but now the Zephyrians would adapt. They would be more cautious, more systematic. The surprise advantage was gone, and humanity would have to rely on different tactics. Signal all units, she commanded. Phase 2 is now in effect. Fall back to prepared positions and wait for my signal. The asteroid mining complex that had seemed like an unimportant backwater was actually a fortress that had been under construction for weeks. Human engineers had connected the mining tunnels into a vast underground network that stretched across dozens of asteroids. Storage facilities had been converted into weapons depots. Industrial equipment had been modified into defensive systems. The entire asteroid belt had become a three-dimensional maze designed to trap and destroy anyone foolish enough to enter. Fleet Commander Zarthul had learned caution from his earlier encounter. This time he deployed his forces in careful formations with maximum sensor coverage. Every ship maintained overlapping defensive fire with its neighbors. Nothing would be able to approach without being detected and destroyed. Begin systematic bombardment of all asteroids, he ordered. I want every rock in this system reduced to dust. No hiding places, no ambush positions. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with devastating effectiveness. Plasma cannons that could melt battleships turned asteroids into clouds of glowing vapor. Quantum torpedoes shattered mile-wide rocks into floating debris. For 3 hours, the bombardment continued until the entire mining complex appeared to have been obliterated. Sir, sensor sweeps confirm complete destruction of all surface installations, reported the tactical officer. No signs of human forces remaining in the system. Zarthul allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Perhaps the first assault had been successful because of overconfidence and poor planning. This methodical approach had eliminated the human threat completely. Then, his ships began taking fire from inside the asteroids they had just destroyed. The truth was that the humans had learned from Earth's bloodiest conflicts how to survive bombardment that should have killed everyone. The mining tunnels went far deeper than surface scans revealed, protected by layers of rock and metal that could absorb tremendous amounts of punishment. Like the defenders of Stalingrad or the Vietnamese fighting from tunnel complexes, the humans had gone underground and waited. Captain Lisa Park commanded Defense Station Alpha from a command bunker carved into the heart of a 10-kilometer asteroid. Around her, human marines and converted mining equipment created a killing field that stretched through interconnected tunnels and chambers. The Zephyrians had destroyed the surface installations, but the real fortress was hidden below. Enemy landing craft approaching Tunnel 7, reported her tactical officer. 200 Zephyrian troops in powered armor. Let them come, Park replied grimly. They're about to learn why humans study military history. The Zephyrian assault troops were magnificent specimens of military technology. Their powered armor could deflect plasma bolts, and their energy weapons could cut through solid steel. They advanced into the tunnel complex with confidence, expecting to overwhelm any remaining resistance. Instead, they found themselves in a nightmare that their training had never prepared them for. The tunnels branched and twisted in confusing patterns. Every intersection offered multiple routes, each one potentially hiding defenders. The lighting was dim and constantly changing, creating shadows where human soldiers could hide. Worse, the humans fought like nothing the Zephyrians had ever encountered. Instead of standing and exchanging fire like civilized soldiers, they used hit-and-run tactics that turned every advance into an ambush. They appeared from hidden positions, struck hard and fast, then vanished into side passages before return fire could be effective. Sergeant Michael Chang led a squad of Marines through maintenance tunnels that connected to the main invasion route. His team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, turning the asteroid's industrial infrastructure into a weapon of war. "Contact front," whispered his point man. 20 Zephyrians advancing through Junction 4. Chang smiled grimly as he activated the prepared charges. The mining operation had used controlled explosives to break up rock formations. Now those same techniques would be used against living targets. The explosion collapsed part of the tunnel roof, trapping half the Zephyrian unit behind tons of rubble, while exposing the rest to concentrated fire from concealed positions. The aliens' advanced armor was designed to stop energy weapons, not simple bullets fired from close range by soldiers who knew exactly where to aim. Similar ambushes were taking place throughout the tunnel network. The Zephyrians had superior technology and individual training, but they had never learned to fight in the confined, chaotic environment that humans had mastered through centuries of urban warfare. Their plasma weapons, devastating in open space, were less effective in narrow tunnels where the energy discharge could be absorbed by rock walls. Their sensors, designed to track large targets at long range, struggled to identify individual soldiers moving through complex three-dimensional terrain. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that understood psychological warfare. Every advance brought new horrors: booby traps that turned their own equipment against them, recorded sounds that made them think they were surrounded, false passages that led to prepared killing zones. General Chen monitored the battle from her command center, watching as Zephyrian assault units were ground down by defenders who seemed to appear from solid rock. The aliens were brave and well-equipped, but they were fighting on humanity's terms now. "General, the enemy is requesting additional reinforcements," Commander Rodriguez reported. "They're taking heavy casualties and making minimal progress." "Let them send more troops," Chen replied. "Every soldier they commit to the tunnels is one less ship defending their fleet. And down here, numbers don't matter as much as knowing the terrain." Above the surface, Fleet Commander Zarthul watched his ground assault forces disappear into the asteroid tunnels, like water poured into sand. Status reports became increasingly desperate as unit after unit was destroyed or went silent. His mighty invasion force was being devoured by an enemy that refused to fight in open battle. "Sir, we could collapse the entire tunnel system," suggested his tactical officer. "Concentrated bombardment would seal all the passages and trap the defenders inside." Zarthul considered the option, then shook his head. "They want us to do that. Look at the pattern of their defenses. They're drawing us deeper into the system, making us commit more and more forces to what should have been a simple occupation." He was beginning to understand that he wasn't fighting a conventional military force. The humans weren't trying to hold territory or destroy his fleet in open battle. They were fighting a war of attrition, using tactics that turned his advantages into liabilities. Every tunnel his forces entered became a trap. Every advantage they gained came at a cost that left them weaker overall. The humans were teaching him that superior technology meant nothing if your enemy refused to fight the kind of battle you were designed to win. The asteroid field had become humanity's fortress, and every meter forward cost the Zephyrians more than they could afford to lose. Part 5. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened aboard the massive flagship Emperor's Will, a vessel so large it dwarfed entire planets. Supreme Admiral Kethvar, his ancient form bearing the scars of 1,000 victories, studied the reports from Kepler with growing fury. "Explain to me," he said in a voice that could freeze plasma, "how our greatest fleet has been held at bay for 6 weeks by a handful of primitives with metal weapons." Fleet Commander Zarthul stood at attention, his forearms trembling slightly. "Supreme Admiral, they don't fight like any civilized species. They use tactics that violate every principle of modern warfare." "Tactics?" Kethavar's voice rose to a roar. They're using sticks and stones. Our ships have quantum shielding and plasma cannons that can melt continents. The truth was that the Kepler system had become a meat grinder that was consuming Zephyrian forces at an alarming rate. Every attempt to advance resulted in heavy casualties from an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The humans had turned the asteroid field into a fortress that defied every conventional assault. Deploy the World Breaker, Kethavar commanded finally. If we cannot root them out, we will simply destroy the entire system. A shocked silence fell over the command chamber. The World Breaker was the Empire's ultimate weapon, a ship the size of a moon, armed with reality-warping cannons that could literally crack planets in half. It had been used only twice in galactic history, both times to end wars that threatened the Empire's very existence. Supreme Admiral, Zarthul said carefully, surely that's excessive for a single mining system, is it? Kethavar replied coldly. These humans have made us look like fools in front of the entire galaxy. Word is spreading that our mighty fleet cannot defeat primitives with bullets. How long before other species begin to question our strength? 3 days later, the World Breaker emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The massive vessel was more than a ship. It was a mobile weapons platform that represented centuries of Zephyrian military engineering. Its primary cannon could tear holes in space itself, creating gravitational anomalies that would rip apart anything within light years. General Chen watched from her command center as the doomsday weapon took position. Sensors showed the massive ship beginning its charge sequence, drawing power from multiple fusion cores to fuel weapons that existed at the very limits of known physics. General, we need to evacuate, Commander Rodriguez said urgently. When that thing fires, this entire asteroid field will cease to exist. Chen studied the tactical display for a long moment, then activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is General Chen. Execute final protocol. This is not a drill. Final protocol was humanity's last desperate gambit, a plan so suicidal that it had never been tested, only theorized by military strategists who understood that sometimes victory required the ultimate sacrifice. Across the Kepler system, human ships that had been hiding among the asteroids suddenly revealed themselves, not just the 47 vessels that had been assigned to the system, but dozens of additional craft that had been assembled in secret, converted cargo haulers, modified mining ships, and even the museum-piece submarines that had been upgraded for one final mission. But these weren't ships preparing to flee or surrender. They were vessels loaded with nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, and fusion bombs that had been jury-rigged into the largest improvised explosive device in galactic history. General, you can't be serious, Rodriguez whispered as she realized what Chen intended. That's mass suicide. No, Maria, Chen replied calmly. That's what humans do when we're cornered. We make sure the other side pays a price they'll never forget. The human fleet formed up in attack formation, accelerating toward the World Breaker at maximum velocity. There was no stealth this time, no clever tactics or hidden weapons. Just ships full of determined humans flying directly at the most powerful weapon in Zephyrian history. Supreme Admiral Kethavar watched the approaching human force with amazement. They're attacking us? With those primitive vessels? They can't possibly believe they can damage the World Breaker. But as the human ships closed distance, something unprecedented happened. They didn't fire weapons or attempt fancy maneuvers. Instead, they simply maintained course for a direct collision. Their engines pushed far beyond safe operating limits. Sir, they're going to ram us, reported the tactical officer in disbelief. Kethavar stared at the display in shock. Ramming was a tactic from the ancient past, something barbarian fleets might have attempted thousands of years ago. No civilized species would sacrifice their vessels in such a primitive manner. Destroy them, he ordered. All weapons, maximum fire. The World Breaker's defensive systems opened up with devastating effect. Plasma cannons that could vaporize battleships tore through the human formation, destroying ship after ship in brilliant explosions. But for every vessel they destroyed, 2 more took its place, emerging from hiding positions throughout the asteroid field. The humans had turned their entire fleet into guided missiles, each one packed with enough explosives to level a city. They came in waves, overwhelming the World Breaker's defenses through sheer numbers and suicidal determination. Captain Rebecca Foster, commanding the converted submarine USS Thresher, watched her ship's hull begin to glow red-hot as enemy fire washed over it. Her crew was already dead, killed when plasma bolts penetrated the reactor compartment, but the ship's momentum carried it forward on its final mission. "This is Thresher," she transmitted on an open channel as her vessel began to break apart. "Tell them back home. The Navy always pays its debts." The collision, when it came, was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Dozens of human ships, each loaded with improvised nuclear devices, struck the world breaker simultaneously. The massive vessel's shields collapsed under the kinetic impact, allowing the following explosions to tear directly into its hull. The world breaker, a ship that had been designed to destroy planets, died in a chain reaction of explosions that created a brief new star in the Kepler system. When the light faded, nothing remained but expanding plasma and the scattered debris of both fleets. General Chen had stayed behind in the asteroid command center, coordinating the attack until the very end. As the shockwave approached her position, she activated one final transmission beacon. To the Galactic Defense Coalition, her recorded message began, "This is General Sarah Chen, commanding human forces at Kepler 442b. If you're receiving this transmission, then our mission has been completed at the cost of every ship and every life under my command." The message continued as the expanding explosion consumed the asteroid field. "We came to this system as the galaxy's unwanted stepchildren, dismissed as primitives with obsolete weapons. But we leave having taught a lesson that I hope you will remember. Technology without warrior spirit is merely expensive target practice. The Zephyrian Empire brought their most advanced fleet and their ultimate weapon to destroy a handful of humans with kinetic guns and chemical explosives. They discovered that courage and tactical thinking can overcome any technological advantage. Humanity stands ready to teach those willing to learn. The enemy has been bloodied, but they will return with new strategies and better defenses. When they do, remember that war is not won by having the best weapons, but by knowing how to use whatever weapons you have." The battlefield spoke today, and it said that underestimating your enemy is the first step toward defeat. I pray that the galaxy learns this lesson before it's too late. Admiral Vexithara stood in stunned silence as the message ended. Around her, the Coalition Command Center had fallen completely quiet. The tactical displays showed nothing where the Kepler system had been except an expanding nebula of hot gas and twisted metal. The humans were gone. The Zephyrian reinforcement fleet was gone. The mighty world breaker that had cracked worlds was nothing but scattered atoms. An entire star system had been turned into a graveyard by a species that had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. "Admiral," the Corvallian communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving requests from 17 different species asking for human military advisors to be assigned to their fleets." Vexithara nodded slowly, finally understanding what she had witnessed. The galaxy had just learned that warfare was more than technology and firepower. It required the kind of experience that could only be earned through generations of conflict. "Send a message to Earth," she commanded. "Inform them that the Galactic Defense Coalition formally requests their assistance in training our forces, and make it clear that we understand now. We need teachers, not just allies." The Kepler system was gone, but its lesson would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had paid the ultimate price to teach the universe that in warfare, spirit mattered more than science, and experience trumped technology every time. The battlefield had spoken, and its voice would never be forgotten.